All right, I'm joined by my Olympic partners for the next couple of weeks and forever, really, guys.
That's so kind, Michael.
Alex Sear, Katelyn, Tocci, we've all gathered together. The Olympics start this weekend, but we thought we would do kind of like a bird's eye view, the top athletes, events, and storylines we're most excited about going into the Olympics. So I'll set the table for us before we get right into it here, which is we're going to do today's pod where we're going to talk all about the Olympics. And then next week, we're going to move the pod up one day. So it's going to come out Thursday morning, 5 o'clock-ish in the morning, Eastern time. And that pod will do a more nitty gritty, like a cheat sheet for you. So you can listen to this pod and that pod, and then you can go hang out with your friends for a run or do a dinner party, and you can impress them with your deep knowledge of the Olympic track and field and marathon events. So next week we'll do we'll do event by event, and we'll prognosticate as well. We'll pick our winners, the whole bit. And so that'll be next week. And as well, I don't know, I'm going to rope you guys into this, but I think we might jump in and do some like instant reaction pods during the Olympics if crazy shit happens, and
we'll be there.
We'll be there. So keep an eye in the feed. Something might pop up where you're like, oh, there's another podcast from Marathon Handbook here. I just got one 2 days ago, but that'll be because something happened and we want to talk about it. And they'll be shorter pods. They'll be like 15, 20, 30 minutes. We promise we won't overwhelm you with Olympic talk. And final thing would be subscribe to the newsletter if you don't already, because we will be pushing out Olympic updates with the newsletter every morning, 5:05 Eastern time, in your inbox with all the links to the pertinent stuff, including like stories, links to these pods, videos, all sorts of good stuff. So you're totally roped in with the Olympics. You know exactly what's happening. Let's roll right into it, guys.
Right.
No preamble today. We're not going to talk about the workouts we did last night or Alex getting into doubling. We can talk about that. We'll talk about that after the Olympics are over.
Oh, but you teased it. Okay.
I teased. I set it up.
You got to stick around.
Yeah. Yes. Let's get right into. So we're going to do athletes, we're going to do events, and we're going to do storylines we're most excited about. Alex, we'll pivot to you first. Who is your athlete that you're most pumped to see at these Olympic Games, and why?
Okay. I choose Sifan Hassan because I'll see her the most. So
without a doubt.
Set the table for us.
Okay. So if you don't know Sifan Hassan, she's an athlete from the Netherlands who's been around the pro circuit for a long time, world champion in the 1500 in 2019, Olympic gold in the 5,000 in 2021, Olympic gold in the 10,000 in 2021. And now you're telling yourself, wait, what event does she specialize in? All of them. Exactly. And this is the case this time around. She's taking on 4 events. All right. The 1500, the 5K, the 10K, and the marathon, which I think is unheard of. Like if someone has done that, they haven't been a contender in every event. And she is near the top of the list in all 4. But then the question remains, can she actually be competitive in all 4? So let me go through her schedule, okay? Her schedule in Paris. These are all the races that she's going to appear in. August 2nd, she runs the 5,000 meter heats.
Okay.
A couple days of break. 3 days later, August 5th, 5,000 final. The next day, 1,500 meter heats. 2 days after that, August 8th, 1,500 semi. The day after that, 10,000 meter final. The day after that, 1,500 meter final. The day after that, a marathon.
And let's just cap it all off with the marathon.
Close this with, let's just, it's like the dopey challenge on steroids. She's basically from Disney. She's like doubling it. I love it.
I think
Did you do the math on how much racing distance this is?
No.
66 kilometers of racing. And I mean, Katelyn, you're an ultra runner. You're like, But for Olympics, So I can't wait to see if she makes it till the end. I think, when you start running, people tell you it's not about how well you do. It's just about finishing. And I think it's come full circle with Sifan Hassan. It's more about finishing.
Yeah,
It is
like
about winning
what?
medals.
I mean, the content, the editor brain is already spinning right now. I'm like, what sort of pieces can we do about this? Like, I think aggregate overall finishing, like what rank she finishes in these overall in all four events would be cool. I mean, first of all, is she going to get through all four events? Is she going to drop one? It would be a bit of a downer if she dropped one, but probably a wise move to like maybe not do that 10,000 meters. That sounds like. It sounds like a bad idea to run the 10,000 meters right in the middle of all that, but it's also probably one of her strongest events, especially at this point if she's going for the marathon, right? So
that's what I was thinking. Don't you think that it's like, isn't it the 1500? I mean, she's amazing and everything, but isn't it maybe the 1500 where she might struggle the most? Alex?
I would say so. I mean,
yeah.
Strategically, if your goal is to win an Olympic medal or an Olympic gold, you wouldn't try to stretch yourself that thin, I think, especially given the caliber of other athletes. Like you go through the races that she's doing. In the 1500, she needs to contend with the world record holder, Faith Kipyegon.
Mm-hmm.
In the 10K, she needs to run against Beatrice Chebet, who's the only woman in history to go under 29 minutes over 10K. And in the marathon, she needs to go against the world record holder there, Tigist Assefa of Ethiopia. So it's like, it's not like any of these fields are weak.
No.
And I'm just guessing that she'll show up to every race against someone who's run faster in that event and who's better rested than she is. But I applaud the effort. I don't know. I think it's a story in itself. And even if she can rack up a couple medals, I think that'd be awesome.
My coaching hat comes on, of course, you guys. And I'm like, oh my God, please, athletes, don't listen to this. I don't even let them do 2 races in 2 months or in 3 months. And they're going to, but look what she's an Olympian. She can do what she wants.
Not only is she an Olympian, she's an insane Olympian. So it's like, I fear that what happens is that she ends up in like between 4th and 8th place in every single event, which on the aggregate would be amazing, would be like, she'd rank among the all-time in terms of Olympic performances in one Olympic Games, but with no medals, that's kind of disappointing, right? It's a dangerous thing to kind of spread yourself so thin. I think if it were just like all the track events, that's one thing, but to add the marathon lingering at the end, I guess the strategy then becomes like you run as hard, you try to run strategically in the qualification rounds for the 5,000 and the 1,500. You go all out in the 5K and the 10,000 meter finals, and then the marathon. What, you just like hold on for dear life? I guess you just get in that lead pack and you hope that it's something magical is gonna shake out, and you're gonna end up with a medal at the end.
Yeah, I think you called it, because if the marathon were first, the strategy would probably be different. I'm guessing that maybe the Netherlands are just allowing this because they don't have that deep of a marathoning corps. It's not like she's taking someone's spot at the marathon. So maybe it's one of those things that's like, she's already there. If she feels good, somehow she'll do the marathon.
Throw her in. Wow.
Yeah.
I love
That's going to be really tough.
I love it. I think this is amazing. I think it's going to be one of the big storylines at the Olympics overall. Once the producers of like at NBC or whatever realize that this is happening, they're like, wait a minute, hold on. This person's doing 4 events. So she's going to get a lot again. Yeah. I think it's cool. Katelyn, who's your athlete? Who you psyched about?
Okay, I'm psyched about a lot of athletes, but I'm really, really rooting for Sha'Carri Richardson. Like, I'm excited about her. I think I'm not the only one. I think a ton of people who have watched Sprint are on board with me. I'm just super excited because following her and kind of watching her story and all of that, and just her unhingedness that we spoke about, and I love her whole persona. Like, she just has so much energy, and I think that she's going to be awesome. And so I'm looking forward to watching her in the 100 meters to see if she can. I mean, she has her PR of, I think it's 10.65 that she did in Budapest, which is she ties Jackson for the 5th best time ever. So we're going to be watching her in that. She's also going to take part in the relay that we spoke about as well. But she's got some really big contenders in there, of course, with the 100 meters, because she's got to go up against Sharika Jackson. She's got to go up against Dean Asher-Smith. She's got to go up against Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price. And Alex, you mentioned someone else, Julianne Alfred, right? What she's going to be in there too. And so the preliminary 100 meter is August 2nd. So get ready for it. And the final will be on August 3rd. So we're gonna kind of like work that race out right away. So I'm super excited to see how she's going to do.
I think I think the women's 100 meter is more exciting than the men's 100 meter. I think it's a bigger event in this Olympics, which is something that it's hard to say whether or not that's ever been true before. I think just like sexism in the past, that the men's 100 meter was the crown jewel, the big heavyweight fight of the Olympics in the past. Like when you think about your childhood, you think about the games that you watched growing up. That 100 meter, the men's 100 meter final kind of sucked everyone in. It became like the must watch event that like everyone knows where they were when that happened. I think this women's 100 meter is more interesting and more exciting. And she is definitely the one to beat, right? And she's electric. I mean,
yeah.
Every time I watch even just YouTube clips of her races, when she wins, there's something like possessed about her, right? Like we've talked about this in a previous pod, when she just runs through the line and wins. She's like Alex, I think you joked last time we talked about Jackson, where you're Richardson, where you're like, she should be a 200-meter runner because she's still putting in a crazy time for 200 after she's won the 100, right? So
she just keeps going.
Yeah.
She just keeps running. It's so exciting.
Yeah. And this is like a long-term redemption arc too for Richardson. And most people don't remember it because she's done so well on the world stage between these last two Olympics, but she missed the previous Olympics because she failed a drug test, wasn't able to compete at US trials. And so there has to be a lot of juice in the can too, to try to go and begin a type of Olympic legacy for her too.
Right. And just for those that don't know, I think it's important to mention that the drug test was a marijuana drug test. So it's not like she's been doping or anything like that. It's not like that was part of the problem. Just for those who aren't up to date with it, that's important too. So
yeah, that was a complete bullshit suspension. And although she is one of these people that I've mentioned this before in previous pods, I've compared her to kind of the Michael Jordan-esque approach to competitiveness, where it's like kind of insane, where she's just like making up enemies in her mind all the time, which helps motivate her, I guess, but
works for her.
It definitely works, but she definitely has created this kind of narrative in her mind where it's like me against the world, me against the media. So if she wins, don't be surprised if you get a little bit of a no one thought I could do this and I did this narrative from her, which whatever.
Right.
And if she doesn't win, that's going to be interesting. So yeah, definitely great pick, Katelyn.
Watch out for her, guys.
Definitely one to watch. And she gets to focus on 100 because she didn't qualify for the 200, which was her weaker event anyway. So I think it actually bodes well for her. And then that women's 4x100 meters, that'll be exciting too. So
that's going to be really fun to watch. Yeah.
So my athlete to watch is sort of the male counterpart to your pick, Katelyn, is Noah Lyles. And the reason why I've selected him, and I wouldn't normally pick a sprinter because, I'm a marathon guy, but we'll talk about the marathon in a little bit. And the reason why maybe there's no clear athlete to pick in the marathon, but you just got to go with Noah Lyles because of the ascent, because of the smack that he's been talking, right? It's like, it's kind of turning the sprinting into like, WWE shit all over again, which is great, which is what the sport needs, right? He is total Showtime. He's blockbuster. He's the guy who's like, Alex, what was it? He's got main character energy.
Main character energy. And if you don't got main character energy, track and field's not for you. That's a direct quote from Mr. Lyles from the Netflix documentary.
Mr. Lyles. Yeah, no, I concur. And he has got that energy, and he has been saying that he wants to be the next one, the replacement for Usain Bolt, the guy who's going to step in and be the dominant force. And I think it's something that's been lacking in track overall, and certainly in the sprints in the last number of years, is the void left by Usain Bolt. And it's been exciting. There's been a lot of competition. There's been a lot more depth. I think it's created kind of like a big question mark going into major events like Worlds or big Diamond League races, or now the Olympics in the past. But Lyles has had a really good season. He's put it all together. He's looking like somebody who might be able to pull off the 100, 200 double gold, and then, the triple gold, which would be amazing and the US team are favored. So I think that's maybe the softest of the three for him. He's naturally a 200-meter runner though, right, guys? And the 100 is going to be really interesting for him to see whether or not he can pull off the win. But he's run really well. He ran a PR in London at the Diamond League track event, the last major event before the games. So he's sharp. He's ready to go. I'm excited to see if this guy can pull it off. And I'm also excited to see what he is going to do, almost more importantly, with that main character energy, whether or not he's able to really amplify track and field on the mainstream stage in a big way. Like I'm going to be watching like ESPN afterwards. The as my wife calls them, the sports yellers, the like First Take, the Stephen A. Smith, people like that. The morning after is the A block. Are they talking about Noah Lyles track, or are they talking about NFL mini camps and who's getting traded in the NBA offseason and whatever, right? Which usually dominates sports talk, right? So if Lyles can elevate track in the Olympics to that echelon, then I mean he's delivering, right? So let's see. Is he going to be the next Bolt? I don't know if he's going to hit Bolt's times. Bolt is 100-meter world record 9:58. 200-meter world record 9:19. I'm not sure if Lyles can touch either of those. 200 meters, he's much closer, and he's run 19:31. So would it be crazy if he breaks one of Bolt's world records at the Olympics?
It would be. I would make $10. More on that later.
Whoa.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
$10 whole dollars. Okay, we'll talk about that
spender.
later.
That's a big better, Alex. $10.
Yeah.
Wow. Careful.
And I wish it for him. I do wish it for him. In the Netflix documentary Sprint. So, by the way, guys, I finally watched all of Sprint. I hadn't done my homework a couple weeks ago. He keeps saying this one thing. I want to transcend the sport. He said that in the first episode. And I didn't know much about Lyles outside of his performances before watching Sprint. I didn't know much about him. I didn't follow him on social media. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, here it is. Another athlete with a massive ego, and he's just talking, he's blowing smoke. You know what? I became a massive Lyles fan because there's some thinking behind that phrase. I want to transcend the sport. He's trying to do exactly what you're saying, Michael. He wants Stephen A. Smith to talk about him. Yep. He sees himself on the same playing field as NBA players. He even threw shade at them, if you remember, right? He said the NBA players call themselves world champions when they win the NBA. Hello, it's just an American thing. I'm trying to be a real world champion. He sees himself as a major star. He's been on Jimmy Fallon. He's doing that circuit, and he wants to take track with him. He wants to transcend the sport, and that's what he means. And I agree. Track needs people like that, like Sha'Carri, like Noah. And so I'm a total fan.
He's totally also going to be one of these guys that if he makes any amount of money, which he already has made a good amount of money, but if he makes even bigger money, you can see him as somebody like a LeBron who's going to start investing in his brand and building out from there. And that is something we've not really seen previously in track and field. We've seen like small versions of it, variants of it with like, brand partnerships and advertising and that sort of thing in the past, but nothing where an athlete has become an entrepreneur as well to that degree. So that'd be exciting to see from him. All right, guys, let's roll right into events.
Okay.
Alex, what's the number one event that you would recommend our audience key in on and pay attention to, and why?
Oh boy. Okay. I have a couple. The one I'll go with is the women's 800 meters. The reason for that is that we might witness a type of history that we rarely see, maybe have never seen in any event. We're looking at a possible 1, 2, 3 sweep by one country, and it's not Kenya and it's not Ethiopia. It's Great Britain.
Oh,
wow.
The
Didn't see that one coming.
The old
No.
island. Yes.
You caught us off guard.
Right now, the top 3 800-meter women in the world are from Great Britain, and the top seeded athlete has run 1:54. She's 22 years old. Her name is Keely Hodgkinson, and she's a total lock for the win. She was second at the previous Olympics If she wins, amazing. But to complete the story, she needs 2 and 3 next to her. You have Gemma Reekie, who's a 26-year-old Scottish athlete. She's the second fastest 800-meter runner in the world this year, 1:55. And then ranked third is another British athlete who's 31 years old, Georgia Bell, at 1:56. So I've never seen something like that in the 8. The 8 is usually quite disparate. The final 8 usually come from a bunch of different countries. We've seen multiple medalists from Kenya in one year, but never 3 from Great Britain, unless it happened, hundreds of years ago or 100 years ago. So I don't think the way that this is possible is, well, one of the top 800-meter runners in the world didn't make it past the U.S. trials. Thing Mo, she fell, unfortunately. And if not for that, she would wreak major havoc in the race, but she will not be there. The other athlete who could break things up is actually a Kenyan athlete, Mary Mora, but that remains to be seen. So I'm excited for the 8. I love watching the 8, the men's and the women's. They say it's the most painful race in track and field. And so, yeah, I'd love to see a Great Britain sweep. It'd be an amazing story in Paris, nonetheless. So makes for good TV.
Awesome.
That's a good
totally.
Pull. That's a good
pull.
And I got to say, those are 3 pretty posh names too. So it's the very, very British.
Sorry, are we doing the with the accents? Kaylee Hodgkinson. How's that?
Oh wow, good.
Oh,
nice.
Okay.
Nice.
Not bad.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even going to participate in this.
Yeah, me either. I'm not doing that. If you wanted the Boston accent, I could do that, but that's it.
Boston.
We'll get to that later. We need to lean on Katelyn's Boston accent for a later athlete discussion.
Yeah, I can turn it on whenever you need it.
I would also say that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but the Caster Semenya sort of cloud hangs over all of this as well, right? When you think about it, it's just. Anyway, it's an interesting scenario. Historically, the 800 has always been a super exciting event because it's like run 400 meters, run one lap of the track as hard as you can, and then try to do it again. That's the strategy, right?
But isn't that like one of the most difficult workouts as well when you do 800s? Don't you feel like 800s are just, oh my gosh, they're torture. They're torture, right? Because it's the same thing. The first 400, you're like, yeah, I feel pretty great. You just take a few steps after that first 400, you're like, I'm dying. Just try to hold on. I don't know how they do it. Yeah,
I think for anyone in our audience, anyone watching the Olympics, is like that's one of the really highly relatable events because it's like we've all done 800s. Even if you're not a track runner, most runners that have, you got any level of experience and you've been doing workouts for a while, you found yourself either on the track or just running a straight 800 meters, or even like, say you're running 3, between 2 and change and 4 minute repeats, depending on your ability level. It's kind of a 800 meter workout, right? So when you're watching these Olympic games and you're watching the 800s, just think about your own 800s when you're doing it. It's kind of one of the fun things being a runner watching the Olympics, right? So, okay. So, Katelyn, what's your event?
Okay. My event. I'm super excited about the women's 200 meter race. I think it's going to be awesome. And there's a lot of talk about trying to beat FloJo's record, right? Which is a record standing for 36 years, right? In 1988. So she ran 21:34 for those 200 meters. And Alex, you guys can always jump in if the numbers aren't right. I think it was 21:34. And right now we have Jamaica's Shericka Jackson. And we have Gabby Thomas from the States. So they're going to be battling it out, not only against each other, which I think is going to be an awesome race between the two of them, but also really trying to get that world record, right? This is like Shericka Jackson's plan is to try to get this. I think it's more important to her than getting a gold medal at this point is beating the world record. And so thinking about, those two battling it out, Shericka Jackson does have a faster PR than Thomas does. Shericka Jackson has 21:41 and Gabby Thomas has 21.6. So it's going to be a really amazing, exciting race to watch. So I think that, everyone should tune in for this one because not only are we looking at a super I feel like rivalry. I don't know if I'm putting that word out there. Of course, rivalry in all of these races. Not only is it going to be a super head to head between these two women, but also they're going to be fighting for FloJo's record.
Yeah, I think that if you've not watched the Netflix docuseries Sprint and you're listening to this, we've mentioned it a couple times already. We did an entire podcast where we basically recapped and reviewed it. Listen to it if you haven't. And I think if you haven't watched it yet, do yourself a favor in the next few days and do a little cram session, do a little binge watch and catch up, because I think this has sort of unlocked something for athletics at the Olympics that I'd never experienced before. And for myself, as somebody who's, the three of us, we're like dyed in the wool running nerds. We're excited about this stuff because we know all these athletes and we've been following along and we've been watching the Diamond League and the World Marathon Majors and all that. So we kind of understand the storylines intrinsically. But Sprint was a real eye-opener and an incredible primer on these sprinter athletes in the Olympics, and especially for the women's 200 and the women's 100 as well. But for the women's 200, you get a real clear understanding of who Gabby Thomas is. You get a really good understanding of Shericka Jackson in a big way. I actually found her quite a compelling character and someone that I'm rooting for as well, but also a perfectionist. And you saw that when she was trying to break the world record last year. Yep. She won a world championship, but failed to break the world record. And it was like total disappointment. There was no celebration at all. She was just like, that was shit. I mean, she might as well have like finished 5th or 8th or not even made the final, right? It just really seemed like maybe this was just part of the kind of narrativizing and editing of Sprint. But the moment they captured, it looked like she was disappointed. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. And and Gabby Thomas.
That's why I mentioned that about the about her goal. I feel like she'll be happier if she breaks the world record. But gold is like second to her. Sorry. And Gabby Thomas, what?
Gabby Thomas is a really just smart competitor. She just seems like somebody who's so dialed in and knows how to execute on the big day and is just so mentally resilient and well prepared, and seems to have a mental approach, which is, I think, very different than you see with most sprinters, where, with the rest of the sprinters in the docuseries Sprint, it really seemed like it was very emotional and creating enemies and sort of like building yourself up. And like, it's just a lot of pressure and a lot of like seeking out maximal performance and perfection. And whether or not it was just sort of how Thomas presents herself outwardly, it seemed to me like she had a very even, calm, but very dialed in approach to race day.
Yep.
And also that shows in her performances too. Good starter, around the bend, her middle element of the race, very strong, and she finishes strong. So it's like, she's just got the full package. So,
and also guys, isn't it time to see a new record? 36 years is an incredible amount of time for a record to stick.
Yeah.
Especially these days with all the tech advancements. Like if you look through all the other records, most of them have been beaten in the last 10 years, 15 years. I can't believe FloJo's record's still standing. To me, it's inevitable that it goes down by the end of these Olympics.
It's time.
What's a wicked rabbit hole to go down is watching YouTube clips of FloJo's races. Some of the outfits are just
I've done
elite body suits. It's incredible.
Well, Sha'Carri says it herself, right? Look fast, run fast, look good, feel good.
That's right. All right. So my event is the men's 1500 meters. Okay.
You stole it from me.
Yeah, this is the Alex event right here.
Should have thought of that one.
It's I think among the most hyped events going into these Olympic Games, just overall. It's this incredible storyline between these two top tier athletes who just like hate each other and are hating each other in public and are just they're not doing that thing you see in track, that politeness you see in athletics historically, where it's like, even if someone says something that could be misconstrued or was disparaging towards another athlete, or threw a little bit of shade on them, usually the other athlete walks it back once the media grabs hold of it. In this case, both of these guys, Jakob Ingebrigtsen of Norway and Josh Kerr of the UK, have just totally leaned into this. And they're, I think, ranked 1-2 in the world going into this. They have been battling it out against each other for the last couple of years. They don't like each other. They have no respect for each other. They have aired out their grievances in public through the media and face-to-face. And they've even raced each other this year, which you don't get to see very often when you get two top-tier athletes that both have a lot on the line. You don't often see them going into Olympics and agreeing to take each other on, which they did in late May at the Prefontaine Classic. They raced the mile, so 109 meters longer than the 1,500 meter finals that you're going to see in the Olympics. And Josh Kerr came out on top, beat Ingebrigtsen by a little bit. That said, Ingebrigtsen has stormed back and shown that he is in the top shape of his life right now, maybe at the peak of his powers, and also very near the world record in the 1,500 meters. So very near the total pinnacle of one of the marquee events in the Olympics. So he ran, Alex, what did he run earlier?
3:26.73, I believe.
That's very close to the world record, which has also stood for a very long time. Hakeem El Garouge's record, 3:26 flat, which has been around for, it's getting a little long in the tooth because El Garouge is long gone, right? So I think
it's also time.
Yeah. Also time. Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to get a crazy 1,500 meter final. These guys, they will have to both go through the heats to qualify. It should be a walk in the park for them. It'll be a huge upset if either of them miss the final.
Oh yeah.
And then it's going to be lights out in the final. It's going to be super exciting. And then we've also got a couple of dark horse candidates that could sneak in and upset the storyline for both of these top tier athletes. And Yared Nuguse, Alex's boy, Alex's favorite of the United States. He's really sort of clicking right now and is definitely somebody that I would anticipate will be a medal threat for sure. Could he get in there and kind of get in between them or ahead of them? I don't know. That's a big question mark.
The thing with Nuguse is, and I love him because that's it, right? He just goes to work and he doesn't deal with the drama. But the thing about him is he seems to be a clear number 3 at this point. He posts really good times. He's better than most other 1,500 meter runners in the world, but he's not beating Jakob or Kerr. And so you need a precedent for that kind of thing. I think at this point, even if only a few seconds separate him and the other two, it would be a massive upset if he beat them. And psychologically, things happen too after a while, right? You somewhat typecast yourself as the number 3 in a rivalry like that when the other two are always ahead. So as much as I'd love to see Nuguse at least climb on the podium, I'd be very shocked if he dethroned one of those two guys. So, but it's the 15, right? That's the fun part about it. You never know what's going to happen.
4 crazy laps, and that bell lap is going to be just off the chain. We'll reserve our predictions for next week's pod. So tune in next week for our prediction in that race and every other major track race and marathon. I will say this. I think the betting odds for one of these guys punching another guy mid-race are not 0. We haven't seen a mid-track race fist fight in many years. It has happened in the past.
It has happened.
I recommend you go to YouTube and type in Haile Gebrselassie punch.
Doing it right now.
Yeah. And then also I'd say the other thing would be to keep an eye out on the post-race press conference. If Ingebrigtsen does not win, I'd say the betting line on him saying some sort of excuse like he had a cold is quite high as well. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come right back with our final segment, which will be the key storylines that we think you should be watching going into these Olympic Games. All right, we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. Last segment of this mega Paris preview pod. Whew, that's a lot of P's there. Storylines, overall storylines that we feel that are must watch. You got to follow and you have to be aware of. Let's start first with, we'll go right to the very end here. We'll go to the marathons first. Let's talk about the men's marathon first. Okay, guys, obviously a bit of the shadow hanging over this Olympic marathon is the fact that Kelvin Kiptoon, the world record holder, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year in a car accident,
Yep.
At 24 years old, I think it was.
Yeah.
And he's obviously not racing. He's not there. He was going to be going in as the prohibitive favorite. And it was going to be, I think everyone was excited about the magic of this Olympics with him being there. Obviously he's not going to be there. So in place of that, we kind of have this open field. And I think that if you have not been paying attention to what's been going on in the Olympics, in the marathon in the last, say, year or so, you look at it and you say, hey, Eliud Kipchoge, the GOAT, the winner of the last 2 Olympic marathons, he's there. He's going to take this. I don't think he's the favorite. And I think that's a huge storyline.
Yeah, because I think everyone is thinking about the Kipchoge-Bekele rivalry and like that they're going to battle it out between the two of them. But is it really going to be like that, Alex?
No, and it's sad because I feel like these two runners are potentially the two, other than Kiptum, respectively, are maybe the 2 best male marathoners in history. Yep. And you can see them going towards the twilight of their career. And it almost feels like they've somewhat dodged each other for 10 plus years. And we never really got to see many races that featured Kipchoge versus Bekele. And I think they might be an afterthought this time around. Oh, I would love to see Kipchoge hand it to the younger guys and do a tour de force. But I do think it's unlikely. There's a massive field out there. I think 201s and 202s are dropping like flies at all of these major marathons. And I struggle to think of a race where Kipchoge runs away from everybody. I don't know. Who are your main guys?
Okay. So first of all, we have to keep in mind that there's a couple of factors with an Olympic marathon, any Olympic marathon that are not elements of most major marathons that we watch. One huge one obviously is there are no pacers in an Olympic marathon. So it's what you call championship style racing. So with no pacers, that means someone has got to go to the front and set the pace. And often these races are fairly slow or seem pedestrian in terms of the finishing time by comparison to the world record or what you see in a Berlin or a Chicago every year. So that's more like if you watch the Boston Marathon, the New York City Marathon, neither of those races have pacers and both are hilly courses. Paris is it's a bastard of a course. It's the middle 18K is brutal. It's a lot of up and down. And it's also going to probably be a pretty warm day. If we remember Sapporo 2021.
Oof.
It was a little sweaty, if I recall correctly. And that race started at 6 o'clock in the morning. These races will start a little bit later than that for European audiences. And also in North America, we'll get a pretty good watching time as well. But these races are going to be warm. So there's going to be a lot of factors that are going to affect performance. So you can't just go down the line and say, this guy ran 201, he's going to win the race because he's the fastest runner in the race. It's not going to happen. So that actually could bode well for the old guys, for Kipchoge, for Bekele, if they use their noodle, use their experience and strategizing. But I mean, I'll lose my mind if Bekele and Kipchoge are in it in the last couple of kilometers and they're in that lead pack with whomever. I may just have to remember what my Twitter login information is and tweet for the first time in 3 years. Not even called Twitter anymore. And but I'd lose my mind. So yeah, I think that instead you're going to look at your boy Alex Siselema, who won Boston this year. I think he's somebody interesting. He's representing Ethiopia. He's very fast and also showed as we saw in Boston, that he can handle the hills. Although, if you remember that race, he got out way ahead of the field and then just sort of hung on for dear life afterwards. So the Olympics will be a bit of a different vibe than that. I also like Benson Kipruto, who's a bit of a seasoned vet, won Tokyo this year, huge PR, ran 2:0, I think he ran 2:01 and change in Tokyo, and did it sort of in a dogfight with another Kenyan athlete with Tim Kiplagat, right? And so he is somebody, and also Alexander Munoz, who won Valencia last year and London this year, although those are two sort of speedster races that have pacers and are flat and have good conditions for running fast. So question mark with those guys. Yeah. Okay. Yep. So that's the men's marathon. Pretty wide open. One little thing we should say, we'll go deeper on the men's marathon in 2 pods from now, because the men's marathon and the women's marathon are in the last couple of days of the Olympics. But should give a little shout out to our pal Cam Levins, who's representing Canada and is the top North American athlete running in the marathon. Did very well in the World Championships in 2022, and could be medal guy. But you never know.
Fastest North American we've ever seen. So
never know.
In the marathon.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. All right. So let's pivot to the next storyline, which is the women's marathon. Again, wide open, I'd say.
So many contenders.
Yeah. And a lot of really interesting athletes, exciting athletes in it as well. I think you've got the world record holder there, Tigist Assefa.
Yep.
World record holder, virtual unknown. Not virtual. She was completely unknown before she set the world record. That world record is bananas.
Yep.
She is easily the fastest person in the race. However, that world record, as previously mentioned, with the difference between these championship style races and these paced controlled, basically time trials at a Berlin where she ran the world record. Very different vibe, but she was in tough in London. I got to see her with my own eyes. I got to see her racing in London when I was there, and she hung in there with some of the best in the world and did pretty well. I don't know if she's the favorite though, which is a crazy thing to say, right? Like yeah. Alex, who do you think's going to win the women's marathon?
Well, it's like, do you go with time on paper? If so, you go with Assefa. Do you go with Olympic experience and savvy? If so, you go with Perez Jepchirchir, who's the defending champ, and she's back from Kenya. Do you go with recent performance at majors? If so, that's a good case for Hellen Obiri, who won Boston 2023, New York 2023, Boston 2024. That's 3 wins in the last 18 months, call it. So between these 3, or do you go experience at the Paris Olympics? Well, then you put Sifan Hassan in
the mix. As long as she's not burnt out.
Yeah, as long.
Contend. Yeah.
There's so many disclaimers. Don't do this at home. And then I need to nerd out on the shoe game a little bit. I'm looking forward to seeing Hellen Obiri, because she'll be wearing those weird On shoes that we talked about in a previous podcast that she also wore in Boston and won the race in, which are made by a robot arm, kind of a 3D printed thing of a microfilament, made in place, made in a few minutes, type of alien slipper shoe. Anyway, I don't know. I think you're right, Michael. I think there are many contenders. The 2:11 thing strikes me, because you're right. People will not replicate their best performances in terms of time. But if someone who runs at 2:11, that is such a display of fitness compared to someone else like, say, a Perez Jepchirchir, who under those conditions, and she's been under those conditions in other major races, could throw down something like a 2:15. That's a massive difference. It's hard to overlook the 2:11, but again, It's the Olympics. There are many intangibles at play. I don't know who I'd put my money on.
I think I'm going to, with Alex mentioning, do you look at the times on paper? I think that I'm going to lean towards runners who are better at hills, runners who are, like, think about the conditions and not just look at the times. Because as Alex just mentioned with Obiri, if you're talking Boston, New York, Boston, you're talking 3 hilly courses to win in 3 really tough courses. You're not talking Berlin, Chicago, Berlin. I mean, every race has its tough, its tough points. But I feel like, someone like Obiri is winning races that are really tough, where the terrain is a little, where you're going to be dealing with more up and downs instead of just a super flat race. So I want to take that into consideration when I think about it, instead of just the super fast times. Now the heat, that's something else. Who's going to be up there being able to run in the heat. And just a teaser for our newsletter tomorrow, Ambi is going to reveal a secret for the marathoners in these Paris Olympics. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I want, if you guys are listening to this, make sure that you open up Ambi's newsletter and subscribe if you haven't, because he's giving away a secret or how the marathoners are planning to stay cool at the Paris Olympics. So just keep it in mind.
Intriguing. Oh, I can't wait to read that. I may have to read the draft this later on today. So that I know
that's cheating,
No.
Michael.
No.
I'm the only one who's allowed to know. No,
I will open it tomorrow morning, 5:05 Eastern time.
5:05 Eastern time.
I think not without doing the prediction thing, because we'll talk predictions down the line when we go deep on the men's and women's marathon. My girl Perez, I mean, she's the one. I think she's the one. You got to be able to handle the hills, the championship style racing, the heat, the pressure, the biggest of stages. And then you got to be able to run really, really, really fast for 10K to finish this race, because the last 10K are relatively flat, not fat. And I like her chances, but we'll do our predictions later. Maybe I'll revise because Helen Obiri is a good pick. Should say Adidas is looking pretty good going into this. Not to get too nerdy about the shoes, but Perez Jepchirchir and Tigges Assefa, both Adidas athletes, both no doubt will be wearing the latest version of the Adios Pro Evo, maybe number 2. And that's been, I think, the most dominant shoe in the world in the last year or so. So, all right, last big storyline that we're looking at. Alex, you teased a $10 bet that you made. Tell us a little bit about that.
About 6 months ago, I interviewed Donovan Bailey, who is the Canadian record holder for the 100 meters at 9:8:4. At one point, he was the world record holder. I should say co-holder in Canada. Bernice Arena has since run the exact same time. But at one point, Bailey was the world record holder, champion in Atlanta in 1996, I believe. Yeah. Now he's a personality around Canada. Right? I was interviewing him because he had written a book. And so obviously we start talking about sprinting. And I tell him that I'm pretty bullish on Noah Lyles for the 200 meters, because at that point, Lyles was just coming off his 1931. And with Bolt's 1919, like we were saying, that's pretty close. I said, this guy only needs a couple more years and he's going to beat Bolt's record. And Bailey laughs me off the Zoom call, basically, and tells me there's no chance that Noah Lyles beats Bolt's time in the 100 or the 200. I said, I don't think the 100, but I think the 200. I said, I'll bet you $10. He said, sold, before telling me that he doesn't think Lyles is necessarily the big future of sprint. He was bullish on Letsile Tobogo of Botswana.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, obviously Bailey watches sprinting pretty closely, right? And I think this is indicative of what we're going to see at these Olympics. The three of us and a whole lot of others have watched sprint on Netflix and now are massive fans of Sha'Carri Richardson, Sharika Jackson, and the like.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What we will see is a massive upset, I think, because some of the big names in sprinting were left off the cast for whichever reason, and they're going to wreak some major havoc. So I'm looking at the men's races in particular. I think if anything, it'll happen on the men's side, but there's also a candidate on the women's side to shake things up. So on the men's side, I'm looking at Kishani Thompson, 977. Okay, he's the fastest 100-meter runner in the world right now from Jamaica, and I could see him winning, and people wondering who the heck he is.
Yep.
Could definitely a possibility.
200. I see. I think Bailey knows what he's talking about. I see Letsile Tobogo being one of the major disruptors. He's gone 1971 this year, not much slower than Lyles. And he was a world medalist at 19. He's 20 years old. So this guy's getting better by the week. And so I expect him to be strong. And then on the women's side, you have Julian Alfred from St. Lucia in the 100 and 200. And one of you pointed out, we're watching this documentary, and she's always right in the background, right? She's the one finishing like 2 meters behind Jackson, behind Richardson. And she's always around. She's lurking. So maybe she's peeking right. So my storyline is in the sprints will make big names that we've never heard of before. And it's going to warrant a season 2 with a bigger cast.
Yeah. You want to get ready for upsets. We should be ready for upsets and the underdogs.
Should be ready. Absolutely be ready for upsets. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm ready.
All right, guys. So we did our athletes, we did our events, we did our storylines. We're locked in. Olympics are coming up. Well, they're coming up this weekend. Did you guys watch the opening ceremonies? Are you guys, the opening ceremonies are such a weird experience. I mean, that's a whole other topic. We can talk about the opening ceremonies next week, but it's a strange, bizarre thing to watch, but neat to watch nevertheless. So the track and field portion starts next Thursday with the race walking. And then, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a pod it's going to come out next Thursday morning, very early in the morning on Thursday. It'll be our big preview of every event coming up in week 1. And then we'll do a pod the following week previewing the last events in the Olympics. And we'll do our predictions, which athletes you should be watching for each event, that sort of thing. And then, as I mentioned before, when exciting things happen, we'll jump on, we'll do quick sort of like instant reaction. We'll do the emergency pod. We'll get to break glass and do and do the emergency pod here and there. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. It goes out every day of the week, the weekday. And we'll probably be sending out some special ones too during the Olympics when crazy things happen, just to keep you in the loop. And if you haven't already, rate and subscribe to this podcast. It helps us deeply if you write a review as well. And watch our YouTube channel. Alex has got new videos coming out every single week. What do you got coming out this coming week?
My 5 favorite early season workouts that's coming out on likely Monday or Tuesday.
Oh yeah. And watch his, he did a first look of what I think is one of the most revolutionary pieces of pure running tech in a long time, which is a treadmill, believe it or not. Treadmills aren't usually an exciting subject, but that was really quite something. And he did a first look at the Wahoo Kicker Run. Make sure you check that out. It's on our channel right now. All right, guys, let the games begin. We'll talk.
Let's do it.
We'll talk next week.
Au revoir.